So it's December 2020 and the world is still a bit of a dumpster fire, so we thought we'd do a little holiday baking to lighten things up and maybe send you some holiday cheer. I mean, nobody's trying to get rid of their quarantine 15 till 2021, right? Before we get into it, just a quick reminder that you can like and subscribe to Fact Bites at any time and hit that bell for notifications so you always know the next time we cook up a new episode. Alright, so last year I went on vacation to Portugal for the first time ever in my life and I ate a lot of delicious things. Guys, remember going places and doing things and seeing people? Good times, am I right? Anyway, one of the things that I ate in Portugal was pastel de nata, which was quickly followed by many pastéis de nata. And let me tell ya, it was great. All crispy, flaky crust and creamy custard. It is so good. It's the national pastry of the whole country. And that was a great call from the Portuguese. Pastéis de nata date back to probably the 1600s, although they didn't officially break onto the scene until the 1830s. Now back in the day, monasteries and convents still had to make money for regular upkeep of their buildings and churches and so on, so many went into business making pastries or cheeses or ale to sell to the surrounding community. In Portugal in particular, many of the convents and monasteries made egg-based confections due to the fact that eggs were a common staple that everyone had in abundance. The monks and nuns would use the egg whites to starch their clothes and then use the leftover egg yolks to make custard treats, which, waste not, want not. Pastéis de nata comes from a specific monastery run by Hieronymite monks in a district called St. Mary of Bethlehem, or simply Belém. In 1820, a liberal revolution swept the country, resulting in a decline in the power and status of the Catholic Church, so by 1834, the monastery was closed along with all other monasteries and convents across the country. The monks turned to pastry to make ends meet, selling their custard tarts to tourists in the area. These tarts, known locally as pastéis de Belém, were popular, so when the monks decided to call it quits, they sold their recipe in 1837 to Domingos Rafael Alves, a gentleman who owned a local sugar refinery. Alves continued to make the tarts for the local tourists and turned the pastéis de Belém into its own local attraction. Although pastéis de Belém is the official name for this confection as found in Lisbon, the tarts soon spread all over the country under the more generic name of pastéis de nata. You can still get an original pastéis de Belém made using the original top secret recipe from the Hieronymite monks in the same shop, although the operation has expanded considerably. They make about 20,000 tarts per day. And when I say top secret, I mean top secret. Only 5 people know the official recipe for that custard filling. So since I can't go back to Portugal anytime soon for the official pastéis, I thought I'd try making my own and take you with me. Let's get started. First thing to know about making your own pastéis is you probably have all of the ingredients lying around in your house right now. You'll need flour, butter, sugar, milk, a cinnamon stick, vanilla, some lemon peel if you're feeling fancy, and eggs. A lot of eggs. So you need to make the dough first. Now, I made puff pastry and felt very proud of myself until I did some more digging and realized that a true pastéis de nata does not use regular puff pastry. Puff pastry is made by folding super cold butter into a simple flour dough over and over and over again. This is a process called laminating, and this layering effect creates super flaky layers in the resulting pastry. And you want your butter to be super cold so that when the heat hits the oven, it immediately evaporates and creates air pockets, putting the puff in puff pastry. Pastéis de nata, although similar, uses a slightly different dough. Think softened butter versus cold, and the key is to roll the dough into a spiral so that the bottom of your tart has a characteristic swirl. I ate mine immediately and never stopped to look at the bottom, which is probably why I missed this. To be fair, puff pastry is delicious and works fine with a custard. Just know that if you make it this way, you are not doing it the official way. Also, I recommend that everyone makes their own puff pastry for this recipe so that you can appreciate the work that went into the store-bought kind from the freezer section after you decide to never make your own puff pastry ever again. Next up, we'll make the custard. You start this by separating the egg yolks from the egg whites. Some people buy a fancy egg separator. I used what I had on hand, which was my hands. Yes, it is very gooey, but also it works just fine. I used 7 egg yolks in the recipe, but actually cracked 8 eggs because I broke one of my yolks. Depending on your recipe, you may use more or less, or even the whole egg, whites and all. Next up, I made the sugar syrup. Sugar syrup is the easiest thing to make. It's just sugar and water. I poured the sugar in the pot first, then poured water over top, and let that heat up until it hit about 220 degrees Fahrenheit on a thermometer. You want to hit this heat to get the right thickness on the syrup so that your custard has the right texture. While the syrup cooled down, I mixed some flour and milk together to create a slurry. The flour helps thicken the custard, and by mixing it with part of the milk first, you'll avoid big clumps of flour that you'll need to whisk out later. I don't know that I succeeded in that, but it turned out fine. Take your slurry and pour it into the rest of your milk with 1 cinnamon stick and the zest or peel of 1 lemon, and let that come to a boil. Whisk it to keep the flour from clumping in the pot, then pour in the sugar syrup and vanilla. So our next step is to add the egg yolks, but you'll want your milk mixture to cool first so that you don't curdle, that is, scramble, the eggs when you add them. Nobody likes lumps of scrambled egg in their custard. I poured this whole mess through a sieve once it was whisked together to remove any remaining lumps before I poured the custard into my prepared tart trays. And by tart trays, I mean this regular old cupcake tray. Alright, so this next bit is super important for real pastéis de nata. A key characteristic for these tarts is the caramelized brown coloring on the top, and you only get that from using a super hot oven. In Portugal, in their commercial kitchens, their ovens are up at 800 degrees Fahrenheit to get that slightly burnt look to the tops. My oven at home doesn't go that high. I use 475 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes, then put my broiler on low to get it to turn nice and brown. I've also seen recipes that tell you to go as high as 550 degrees Fahrenheit, but not every oven can go that high. My advice is, use the highest setting you're comfortable with and keep an eye on them. If your pastry is puffed and your custard looks set, i.e. it doesn't jiggle when you shake them, you can use your broiler like I did for that final caramelized look. Quick side note, do yourself a favor when you start this project and butter the heck out of your trays. Do you think you've used enough butter? Good, now add some more. There's nothing so disappointing as a beautiful tray of tarts that won't come out of the pan. Finally, just before serving, sprinkle with some more cinnamon and or powdered sugar and enjoy. Looking at these now, they are not the prettiest pastiche, but they were pretty darn tasty, and honestly, that's all that matters. So hopefully I've inspired you to add a new treat to your list of quarantine baking experiments. What are you baking this season? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe and that bell for notifications. And for any Portuguese out there, I really apologize for butchering both your language and your national pastry. Feliz Natal and happy holidays from all of us here at Fact Bites. Stay safe, everyone.